Hi, good evening, everybody. It's Robert Hansen. Welcome. It's Friday night, the last Friday in the month of January. We are celebrating the coming up on Valentine's Day in a few weeks, and we've got a lot going on. We're getting at it, ready to roll out of winter, I hope, and enough of this cold weather. This weekend should be warm and on the move. So it's great to meet everybody once again. If you haven't met me before, my name is Robert. I do these Facebook Lives periodically throughout the months. They're posted on my webpage, and they're also posted on my Facebook page should you be interested in coming aboard down the future. The topics vary from time to time, and we try to cover a lot of array of topics, not just things limited to the psychic experience, but also just life questions and life challenges and all of those kind of issues that we try to bring up here on a Facebook level. So tonight I want to get into it. This is a very big topic, a very sensitive topic. I think it kind of ties into this Valentine's Day, coming out of the holidays, coming out of Christmas, coming out of the Hanukkah season, coming out of the New Year season. It's a time that tends to elevate. Thanksgiving, of course, it tends to elevate who we love. It also brings family members together where there's often friction and sometimes cohesion. It all depends on how your family is moving. It tends to drive up and bring to the surface again memories of those who we love, those that have passed on, those that we've had challenges with, and so on and so on and so on. So tonight's topic is called, or I like to coin it, the 4 levels or the 4 types of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a very tricky thing, so this is going to be a little bit technical at first, and then we'll widen it into a comfortable conversation. In the human being, as we were created and as we evolved as a human animal, right? We are mammals. We have been born as a mammal, and we have been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years. And one of the things that separates us as a human animal and all other animals, birds, alligators, cats and dogs, the beautiful butterflies, anything you can think of, is that we as human beings are consciously aware that we are here. All other animals in nature respond more to their genetics. They respond just to their evolutionary process. But the human being is kind of extraordinary. We're highly adaptable. We have been given a wide range of intelligence, a wide range of emotion, a wide range of living opportunities worldwide. Our variables are countless and endless. And all of this is kind of calculated into an evolution of what we call the egoic structure or our self-identity. Each person you meet, myself included, of course, each one of us has a self-identity. It's how we see ourselves in the mirror. It is how we have been conditioned by our families. It is how we're conditioned by our culture, by the country we live in, the relationships that we have, experiences that we've gone through. All of this kind of cultivates this identity, or what is referred to as the ego or the egoic process. The egoic process, however, is not our true identity. Our true identity was born before the ego rose. In the Zen tradition, for example, one of the great questions asked in a koan is the term used for a Zen riddle, And one of the questions that's often asked in the Zen community is, what was your face before you were born? Meaning they're asking the practitioner to deeply look at what they were prior to the induction of these ideas and these opinions and these conditionings and all of this, right? In the structure of the human mind, that which has been taught to us, which expands in us, which grows in us, the ideas of good and bad, right and wrong, what should be happening, what should not be happening, how others we think should behave, how we consider ourselves to behave, we begin to form judgments, opinions, attitudes, concepts, ideas, not only of ourselves, but that which moves around us. The ego, the self-identity, then begins to navigate this life process through the telescope of these judgments, these ego opinions, these variations and experiences. They cultivate this concept or this idea of being forgiven, right? Let's say, for example, you're out in nature by yourself, you're walking through the woods, and a tree branch falls and it hits your shoulder. Right? The tree, it just broke, it just breaks, boom, hits you on the shoulder. Your head turns around almost angrily at the tree like it's an outsider. It almost goes, wow, man, you really hurt me. That really hurt. It's almost as though you're talking to the other, correct? You might say to yourself, man, I was kind of dopey for standing here so long. I should have taken a different path. I didn't pay attention to what was happening. And you start to punish yourself. Because now you got a big black and blue mark on your shoulder. You're looking at the tree and you're saying to yourself, I've been down these woods. I'm a woods person. I'm in the forest all the time. I should have known it. I should have seen it. But you didn't, right? Rather than simply acknowledging and saying, a piece of wood fell and hit me on the shoulder, that's what happened, the ego, the identity, starts to cultivate a story about that event. And based upon the internal movement of that person, that story will seek some level of acceptance, right? So what normally is just a tree branch falling and boom, hits something. So for example, look at it this way. Let's say an animal is passing underneath. A dog, a cat, a bear, something, and the same tree branch falls, it hits them. They have a defensive posture for a minute. They get startled, whatever the case might be. They shake it off, and they move on. You don't see the bear pull over to a rock and start beating itself over the head, rubbing its paws together, saying, what a terrible bear I am. I didn't notice that the tree branch was falling, right? So this idea of creating and developing the idea of forgiveness, errors, mistakes, flaws, doing well, being great, all of this has been driven over probably 1 million years of evolution. And the way we respond to our universe is really a matter of how we've been conditioned. It's really what happens. So the idea of forgiveness is really something that is actually man-made. The mountain doesn't have to forgive the rain for falling on it, right? Nor do the waves complain to the ocean that it's too rough today. It simply is a movement of nature itself, which you and I are both a part of. That being said, as we all know, over centuries upon centuries upon centuries of time, the human community of mankind all over the world in different forms and different variations have cultivated spiritual practices, religious groups, and so on. And in those religious groups, those spiritual studies, whatever it might be, little by little, rules started to form. You should do this, you should not do that. You should do this, you should not do that. Probably the greatest example of this would be the very, very famous, of course, the 10 Commandments, which was received by Moses, considered by the Jewish people to be sent by God directly to Moses. And it laid out basically these 10 commandments, amongst many others, of course, but the primary 10, in which the human being should not only God of their understanding, but also how to conduct themselves morally, spiritually, socially in this life experience. And in doing so, they set up basically a standard in which you will please or be displeased by what you do. If you do something that is pleasing, you will feel like you're doing well, and this kind of inner reward that is given, which the ego loves, right? I'm doing great. Look how good I am wonderful. I am holy. I am religious. I am spiritual. Loves it. And on the flip side, of course, if you fail or you're flawed or something along those lines, the ego equally becomes full of guilt, fear, worry, doubt, self-punishment. All of those variables come in, you see? And all of that is created really through the movement of one's thoughts. Without thought, without the mechanism of thought, the universe, Mother Nature, whatever terms you like without getting too esoteric here, that whole movement is just the movement of life. It's just a flow. It is only the human thoughts that have created separation, categories, distinctions, attitudes, and opinions. So based on this, there are primarily 4 types of forgiveness. So I'd like to begin with each one, and I'm going to save the last one for the end, which I think is the most powerful. The first one, I, Robert, have done something to harm one of you. Right? I have done something. I was late for an appointment. I hit your car and I pulled away and I didn't say anything. I owed you $20 and I neglected to pay you back on time. Whatever it might be. I've done something to harm you, or you've perceived my behavior as a harm, right? And I approach you because part of me hurts. My sense of conscience says what I did was incorrect. I should have handled it better. I should have handled it differently. So therefore, I want to seek release of this problem. I want to seek release of this pain. And I want to move forward and go to somebody, the person that I've harmed or the group of people that I've harmed, and ask them to please accept my apologies. And I'm asking them to please forgive me. I've done something that I should not have done, right? In doing that, though, another variable happens. I've also empowered the other people across from me, those that I've wounded. I've made them fundamentally my judge and my jury. They have a great power right now. I'm coming to them kind of with my heart open, my head down a little bit, my hands out, and that person or persons can say, no problem, we forgive you, we know we've made the mistake ourselves. It kind of gives me permission to eradicate that nagging pain in my chest that I caused, and it also gives them a sense of fulfillment that this person is a kind of a stand-up guy. He'll be willing to admit when he was wrong, and he kind of cleans the slate, and we can move forward together in kind of a comfortable way, right? And that's not a bad deal. I mean, that's a normal human behavior. That's how we think as human beings, right? If you ever see 2 ducks, for example, fighting over a common piece of bread, one duck is the more dominant, the alpha duck, let's call it. He gets the bread, or she gets the bread, and off they go. And the other duck goes, and it just walks away and does something else and looks for bread over there. They don't come back later on and start to crack at each other saying, why did you take that bread from me? You owed me the bread. You didn't do it. They just kind of dismiss it. The ego, quote unquote, does not exist inside those creatures, right? Those beautiful animals. But within the human, it does. It does. Now, here's the tricky pieces here. Depending on the person and what the harm has been, right? Depending on the person and what the harm has been, the people that have been harmed can really lay down some very heavy, heavy rules, right? They say, for example, if you want us to forgive you, I mean, we'll forgive you, but we want you to know how much you hurt us. And it's not a one-time comment or a one-time sentence. Quite often it can be lasting, it can be brought up in your face, it can be brought up over and over again. Remember last week when you did that, we're not forgetting it. You're okay right now, but we're not going to forget it. We're not forgetting it. And the fact that forgiveness is on the table not only empowers certain people, but many, many people grasp onto this opportunity to be superior to the other. There is a sense of fulfillment. There is a sense of pleasure in knowing that you've got somebody under your thumb and they are counting on and hoping you are forgiven. Let's take a classic example, right? You got a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and the girl says, I'm sorry, I was late for dinner. I got stuck in traffic. I didn't watch the time. He's standing there stamping his foot. I've been waiting for a half an hour for you. What the hell's the matter with you? And she says, I'm so sorry, and I apologize. And this guy, depending on the personality now, can turn it into holy hell. Accusing, yelling, screaming, you're no good. What's the matter with you? Don't you ever do it again. I'll walk out of your life. All of that, having someone cringe, having someone apologize over and over again, making them feel subservient. And that person who's doing that, there is no love at all in that kind of a challenge. Zero. That is strictly one person's ego enjoying its inflation at the hurt and the wounding of another. Call it what it is. Now, if that person said, look, you were late, I understand there was a problem, it was very inconvenient for me, it's done, thank you so much, let's move on and continue. Because that person who was late did come forward and say, I'm sorry, I can't change it, I can't get rid of it, I can't undo it, so please accept my apologies. And a person that is got their head on straight, someone who is kind of grounded, kind of centered, they know that in their lifetime too they've made mistakes. But for a person who enjoys being more powerful than the other, when one ego senses a weakness or an inferiority in the other, they will take advantage of it. Or if that person who has caused the harm typically kind of like runs the show, this is the perfect time for that other person to really lay the hammer down and break their chops and really give them a very, very, very hard time. So the first type of forgiveness is you or me have done something to the other and we're asking for their forgiveness, right? And as I said a few moments back, you have set them up now for their reactions and their response. Internally within you, depending upon how you see yourself, your own self-worth, your own self-identity, you will say to them, listen, I said I was sorry, that's the end of this. And you'll make a very relaxed but focused, firm statement. Enough. I already apologized. Enough. Stop carrying it on. I want to go out and have a nice evening, and why do you persist on this? What is your point? Right? They keep hitting at you, right? A strong person will put an end to that. And they will say, look, I'm not putting up with that. I apologize. That's the end of it. This ego will elevate itself to match that ego. But a lot of times, this person, the one that did who made the mistake, many, many times, and I've seen it in my office so often, where they come in with their, with their head down, and they kind of take on this whipping post mentality that they are fragile and that they're needy and that the other person really knows how to control them, and they fall for it. And it's very, very, very common. I'm sure you know people that are like that, perhaps even yourself. You may have seen your dad do it to your mother, or you may have seen your mother do it to your dad, or something like that, right? Okay? That's the first type. That's the first type. The second type is where you've done something to me. You've done something to me now, right? And now you've made me very powerful. I now have the sword in my hand, and I have the scale of justice in the other, basically. And this is happening with parents and so on, and parenting. And my daughter comes in, or my son comes in and says, look at that, I took the car, I shouldn't have taken the car. And I got a little dent on it, and I'm sorry, and this is what happened, right? You may have a normal level of anger. You can have a normal sense of violation. You may have the sense that I told you not to touch the car, I told you not to do it. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with having consequences connected to that behavior. Nothing wrong with that. You're not getting the car for a week, right? You're not getting the car for the week. If they're in a situation, for example, where they need an allowance or something, you may cut that off. You may limit their social activities, right? Something like that. However, if your agenda or your intent is to harm them, punish them, please understand, punishing only has one motive, and that is to injure. That's it. The discipline of conditioned behavior, the discipline of imposing rules and controls and consequential behavior on someone that is reasonable and fair is a helping tool to help the young person maturate, as it does with adults, to maturate or to grow up and take on more of a sense of responsibility. The person that is giving the forgiveness, they have a wonderful opportunity to show that forgiveness is a wonderful tool. It is a wonderful element within the human being that we can forgive. We can allow the other people around us to make mistakes, with at the same time teaching them that what they did is harming other people, wounding other people, making situations much more difficult than necessary in this community called family. And the father or the mother can be very firm about it, but at the same time, behind it is a sense of forgiveness. Yes, I understand. When I was your age, I did crazy stuff too. I know you didn't go out and intentionally drive my car into a telephone pole because you're mad at me. That's a whole different scenario. Of course, that has a different level to it. But that person who has now been given the power of control, you'll see this a lot of times, sometimes in business environments. You hear about stories in military life. You hear stories in sporting events. You hear stories in football teams where the rookie comes up or the new employee comes up and they give them all the rough work, the tough work. They give them the bad jobs. They give them more the demeaning stuff, the paper filing. They got to stand post. They got to pick up the locker room stuff. And there's a certain rites of passage that comes with that. But some people don't see it that way. They see it as they're stuck and they're kind of put in a position where they have no choice. They're kind of jammed up and they got to keep this job. They can't afford to lose the money. They signed on for the U.S. Army, for example, and they don't want to leave and they have to stay and they're committed to staying. And internally, they start to build up a resentment like this. And they say, back in their subconscious, when I get the turn, when it's my turn, and I become a sergeant, when it's my turn and I become the boss, when it's my turn and I become the manager of the Burger King or whatever the case might be, wait till these guys screw up. I'll show them what it's like to be a tough boss because I went through it and I need some sense of revenge. I've got to get back. And it's not because you want the employees to grow and flourish and really do well. It's more the fact that there's a payback mentality and you hold the forgiveness as a whip. And that is a problem. When you put forgiveness in the same category as punishment, that's a big problem. And many, many, many people I meet do it. And what is really driving that is a level of insecurity and a level of fear. The ego within that person is really quite fragile, despite the screaming, despite the yelling, the over-empowering personality. All of that is driven by a demand for them to be right and for you to be wrong. And as long as you know you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, do you get it? How wrong you are, I will then consider forgiving you. Now, forgiveness doesn't take weeks. It doesn't take months. It doesn't take days. Forgiveness is immediate. I didn't say anything about forgetting what happened. I didn't say you should forget it. But when you forgive somebody completely, it is immediate and it is instantaneous. It comes in the same category, really. True forgiveness is a form of tremendous love. True forgiveness is an expression of tremendous love. And you know, as I've often shared here on this Facebook Live, this is not a religious reference. This is a spiritual, psychic investigation into human phenomena. And I often refer to different spiritual teachers. One of them, which is quite popular, I've used it many times here, is the Christ figure. And one of the great statements that, according to Scripture, according to what was recorded, despite his torture, despite his terrible, terrible, terrible suffering, the Christ figure calls out, Father, meaning all that is, forgive these people for what they are doing. They do not know what they are doing. Some people have taken that to mean that they don't realize I am the Son of God, and they are killing me. Had it been anybody else, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But since I'm the Son of God, they don't know what they're doing. And that is completely not what Jesus meant at all. What he meant was, inside the ego of all of these people, all of this fear, all of this empowered necessity, all of these weakened people who enjoy the whip over the whip of those that can't defend themselves, that whole thing. He's saying, look how weak they are. Look how sad they are. Can they do horrible things and create great trouble for people and imprison people and make people suffer? Absolutely. I'm not talking about that. On the external process, non-forgiveness can be very, very, very challenging. But we are talking here about intimately within the evolution and the rising of your own soul. To really radiate as a soul, forgiveness has to be front and center. So on the first two levels, one, I have done something and I'm offering myself to you with an open hand saying, here I am sorry, here I am. And you come from a grounded place where you understand on a physical level that this was an error, and you offer it as an apology, asking in a nice way for forgiveness. If they say, I'm not going to forgive you, I don't want to forgive you, I'm never going to forgive you, the hell with you, and you have truly meant it, and you're not repeating it over and over and over and over and over again, where you're asking for forgiveness or a constant apology is every 15 minutes, and it just wears off, right, like the boy that cried wolf, then you can understand how some people may not want to forgive you, right? I remember I'm going back 30 plus years ago, I would have a little too much to drink, and I would say I was sorry, and then the next day I'd do the same thing. You know, you get 2 or 3 episodes like that, whoever's around you is going to say, I don't believe you, I ain't forgiving you, just go do what you want, but get the hell away from me. And you know what? They were right. I really wasn't changing who I was. I wasn't ready to really, really ask for forgiveness because I knew deep down I was going to do it again. I knew I was going to do it again. Absolutely, I knew it. Right? But I just wanted to get them off my back, and I was trying to use the forgiveness card to kind of roll through another week or two of bad behavior and wear them out with it. You see? That becomes forgiveness as a form of manipulation. I am not referring to that at all, okay? So when you are really sorry about something, you've done something which is driven by your egoic structure of how you judge yourself, right? If you have a personality that likes to shoplift, and you truly justify it in yourself, you deeply rationalize it within yourself, to you it's perfectly fine. The shopkeeper catches you and finds that you have a loaf of bread under your arm or something, and you go, yeah, so what? And you're not gonna say you're sorry? No, I'm not. I know it doesn't bother me. I just like you care less what you think. If I could get away with it, I'll do it tomorrow. And there are many people that are like that. There are people that do that with finance. There are people that do it with money. There are people that do that with relationships. Being forgiven means nothing to them. They could care less if you forgive them or not. Their arrogance is so off the hook. They become immune to asking for forgiveness. And the other person, of course, is being wounded by it. And they then are forced to never have forgiveness. And they are forced to use distance and time to keep them away. You see? So, and then of course, as I explained, the other person is me now. I've been empowered with this, situation of having this great strength of, I am the judge sitting up high up on my bench with my gavel in my hand, ready to slap it down and let you know what's going to happen here. And you'll see things like this, of course, growing up. Some of you may have experienced it. Wait till your father comes home. He's going to teach you a lesson. You're not going to be forgiven for this so quick. That whole thing. And it makes people cower, or it makes people enraged, and it generates something inside that person that can become a twisted, very wounded being. And that being, as they grow up as adults, also learns that part of life is to punish and not forgive. And believe me, folks, you all know people that are like that, and you may have very well experienced it yourself. A lot of people take this forgiveness thing as being wimpy or soft or something like that. It's got nothing to do with it. I'm not talking about modified make-believe forgiveness. Real forgiveness, deep forgiveness, is to look at the other person and say, I know that your ego, your level of consciousness, your depth of understanding of how you are doing things is still very dark. And I know if you would just see it differently, you would never act that way. You would never. That's what happened with me. I couldn't understand why the drinking was such a big deal. I couldn't get it in my head. I realized things were going wrong. I get all that. But I just couldn't get it. And then it became clear to me one day. I said, oh my God, now I know what they're talking about, right? And I went back to my family and my wife and others, and I said, please forgive me. And they're like, yeah. You know, I said, I understand. I do. I wasn't upset with them. I got it. And I said, you'll see. And one day you will forgive me because you're going to see a different guy. And that was 30 years ago. And with respect, there is kind of a different guy here now. And they don't even smell my breath or look for breath mints or any of that stuff when I come in the house, which they used to do a long time ago, of course. You know, they could smell it on my breath in a minute. You could smell me coming a block away, for God's sakes, right? So now that doesn't even come in. So forgiveness came like that because it was genuine and it was real, you see? So those are the first two, forgiving others and then you being empowered to forgive other people. Be very careful internally on your spiritual journey how you respond to being wounded and how you respond to the role you have when you are being asked to forgive other people. Listen, we all see stuff on TV, we all see stuff on CNN, we all see stuff on these news channels about people, and people sit back in their chairs and saying, if that was me on that jury, I would just, do this, and I would do that, and I would do this, and I would do that, and I would punish them, and I would do this, and I would do that, right? And it's a very convenient, ego-driven way of doing it, right? And I'm not suggesting under any level that the person doing that bad harm, or whatever those harms are, do not deserve to be incarcerated and punished. They have to be punished for their crime. That's it. But deep down, can you sense that the person that caused this is broken, twisted, fractured? Their egoic structure, their sense of self, their sense of well-being is so broken. The only way they can go through their lives is through harming others. They can't live in society. I agree. They have to be separated, no doubt. A healthy society can't let the wolves take over the night. You can't have it. Right? That's why our great police officers and our U.S. military and the firefighters and first responders and all these amazing people that are part of this great country of ours step up, especially the great police officers. You guys know I'm a big back to blue guy, and they go out and they try to keep a balance act between us and the bad guys, right? Because you need somebody out there to offset the crazy ego that is way out of control in most human beings. The human evolution is light years away for becoming a planet of peace. You can pray for peace. You can pray for peace, you can daven for peace, you can write about peace. You yourself can act peacefully. But as you all know, many people you meet do not seek peace. They seek power, they seek to manipulate, they seek control, and so on and so on. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I'm just going to take a little water here for a moment. The third level of forgiveness is self-forgiveness. And this is a big one. This is a big one. As many of you know, I have an office in my hometown of Merrick, New York, and I see people constantly on a daily basis, and I am forever, and I mean forever, running into people that will say something like this. I should have realized my husband wasn't feeling well. I just said, yeah, are you okay? And I went to sleep, and he died in his sleep, right? And they wake up and say, if only I had not fallen asleep. If only I had done this. If only I had done that. And not only is it just a reflection of perhaps relooking at it, but they punish themselves over and over and over. It's almost as though their life becomes interrupted because what they perceive was something that they should have done to do something. Look, there are two types of main guilts that I see, right? Well, actually, there are three. Let me clarify that. There are people that do something about something, and they really try to do something, and it doesn't work out quite the way they had hoped, and they feel bad about it. But they know they gave it their best shot. They did all they could. It just didn't work out. And then you have people who know they should have done or could have done more, and by omission, they opted to take the easier way, the softer way, the quicker way, and the results could be quite damaging and catastrophic. But they kind of justify it and say, well, I tried. But deep down, there's a guilt that is brewing because they know they could have done much more. And then there are people who simply ignore responsibility. They could care less, and they go off, and there's all kinds of carnage, all kinds of damage as a result of that behavior. But within them, even after time, unless there is absolute psychological separation and some type of a person that is a sociopath, a psychopath. I'm not talking always running around with knives and stuff, the Hannibal Lecter stuff. I'm not referring to that. There are just people that internally they have sociopathy issues. They have a movement of the mind and of their thoughts where they don't process guilt, they don't process fear, they don't process worry. They move by a different drummer. I'm kind of removing them from the conversation. That is kind of a pathology. That goes into a whole nother realm. I'm talking about basically healthy-minded people on a day-in, day-out basis. And when you stand in front of that mirror in your bathroom or you stand in front of that mirror in your bedroom, I have met endless people that punish themselves terribly. I often share this about parents. As you guys know, I've worked with many, many parents over my career who have lost their children. Many. And they are forever second-guessing themselves. Forever. I meet people that will not go to a party. They can't celebrate. They can't enjoy themselves. Just by the mere fact that their child has died. Nothing to do with them. They didn't cause it. They didn't do anything. The child developed some kind of horrific cancer of the brain. They did everything they could medically for the child, but somewhere in their mind, they feel somehow, what did I give them when they were a baby? What should I have done differently in my pregnancy? I should never have had that glass of wine that third month. They come up with all kinds of stuff to punish themselves and to really, really find a way of not allowing themselves any sense of self-forgiveness. They are the strongest judges against themselves, more than anybody on the outside. You bet. They punish themselves worse than any punishment anyone can give. And I know you know what I'm talking about. The question is why? Why? When you know authentically you did all you could do, even if you didn't do everything you could do, you acted at that time the way your level of consciousness saw it. It's very easy to look back, very easy to Monday morning quarterback somebody and turn around and tell them, I should have done it differently, and because I didn't do it the proper way, I struggle. Yeah, we could all go back into the past and make a million reasons why we jammed ourselves up with money, with relationships, with sex, with drugs, rock and roll, whatever it is. We've all been there. I'll be at the head of the class. We've all done it. But there are two ways of looking at it. One is, I see it as a lesson to be learned, something I really can see. I can look back to what I did, and I can actually see and look at myself honestly and say, I could see what drove that behavior. I could see what pushed that behavior. I can see that behavior rising. And I also can see the fact that I no longer are a slave to that reflex. So those experiences, negative as they were and as punishing as they were, also acted as a great teacher for me, and they act as a great teacher for you. But I am challenging you to ask yourselves, and this is a challenge, I'm challenging you. If you do not, you have no ability to change the past. No one does. No one. We cannot go back. You've heard it over and over again, not just by me, but so many other people. You can never go home. You can't go back. You can't. It's the unchangeable, unfixable past. Right? So your mind, your ego, is stuck in what you feel you should have done, which suggests to you that you're kind of, quote, playing God with yourself. And if you're not a perfect human, flawless, never makes a mistake, never missed an exam, unless you lived your life something like that, You are broken, you are defective, you are not good, you are not whole. You're trying to get your parents to be proud of you, you're trying to get your neighbors to enjoy you, you want your boss to shine on you, you want all of these things to happen, and if they don't occur, you feel less than, and you look in the mirror and say, I am unworthy, I am no good, or you take the opposite approach that says, the hell with all of you guys, I don't care what you think, and there's an arrogant anger that grows out of that, almost a defiance. I remember, I knew this guy a long time ago that was really a bad guy. I mean, he was a bad guy. He did a lot of time in prison, and he was a friend of mine, though. I grew up with him, basically, but he was a bad dude. And I didn't hang out with him in those ways, but I knew him from town. And he said to me, when I decided to be a gangster, I wanted to be the best gangster that I could be. That was his actual statement. He says, I'm going to be the best bad guy I can be. And he really was a sociopath. He really was. He could go out and do terrible things, blow up someone's car or do some other crazy stuff and go to bed like nothing happened. It just didn't affect him. Forgiveness wasn't even in the tip of his tongue. And if you asked him in any way, do you forgive him? He'll look at you like you want to rip your head off. Like, why do I have to? What do you mean? You don't have to forgive me. I know what I'm doing. Leave me the hell alone. That was his approach. Unfortunately, he dies alone with no friends, right? And he had quite a miserable life. He really did. So the gift of forgiveness is a very powerful one. But remember, it is born from your ego, right? So when you stand there and you don't allow yourself self-forgiveness, when you continue to punish yourself, when you continue to say, I should have, could have, would have, should have, if you could have, you would have. Look, the Buddha, the great Buddha, was asked a question, and I may have shared this here from time to time, but he was asked a question about karma, the cause and effect of human life. And the Buddha said this, he goes, look, if you were supposed to have acted any differently, you would have. If you weren't supposed to have had those experiences, you wouldn't have had them. And if it wasn't supposed to happen to you that way, it wouldn't have happened to you. But it did. Those things did occur. And they didn't occur for you to punish yourself. They occurred so you could see the freedom and the peace by not repeating them. That is the great gift of being self-aware. You can see the mistake. You can forgive yourself for the mistake because you recognize it is just the movement of your interpretation process, your egoic structure process, trying to process something. And whether it's gilded with greed, vanity, demand, lust, whatever it is that drives those things, right? And that's what made you act the way you did. That's the way it was at that time. Now, if those behaviors come up now, and you still allow them to exist, and you act on those behaviors, then yes, you're going to have consequences of those behaviors. And yes, you are probably going to feel a rising of guilt and a rising of self-punishment, like I did with the alcohol, and repeat it until you realize deeply, deeply, that you're jamming up your life, and there's such a more beautiful, peaceful, wonderful way to live. I mean, God's grace. It's a beautiful existence to live not only sober, and I'm not referring just to alcoholism, sobriety. I'm talking about living a sober life, taking life on life's terms, living one day at a time, allowing yourself to be human, who have made flaws and mistakes. And believe me, folks, you're going to continue to make mistakes. I probably make 20, 30 a day in various little things. I forget my car keys. I do this, I do that. I forget to make a phone call. I'm late for an appointment from time to time. We all make them. The question is it something I'm intentionally doing, or is it just a byproduct of my own ins and outs of human awareness? Which is really what it is, you see? But the fourth one, which is the big boy on the block, and it's the one I really wanted to save for the end, is really what drives a lot of people, and it can put people into some really, really, really crazy boxes mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and that is the seeking of forgiveness from the God of your understanding, right? We look to the heavens, we look to the eternal, we look up, and we plead for forgiveness. We plead through forgiveness, right? In my Catholic tradition, again, this is not religion, so please, if you're listening, this is not religion. I'm just trying to give you a kind of a sense of certain things here, okay? In my Catholic religion, I go to Mass every Sunday, 8 o'clock up here at Sacred Heart in Merrick, my local parish. And at the beginning of the Mass, there's like kind of an introduction, and there's a small prayer that we say at the beginning. It's kind of an act of contrition, meaning I kind of like am apologizing for what I've done. And you'll see some guys actually, through my faults, through my most grievous faults. And that's the way the Mass begins in this particular parish on certain Sunday Masses. You begin the Mass, the celebration of Christ, the celebration of peace and love, with an apology. When we were born, they said we were born with original sin. I haven't even hit the planet Earth yet, and they've already told me when I come out of my mother's stomach, I'm already jammed up with original sin, right? Which they're pointing to, by the way, is the egoic conditioning. And even those guys, way back, John the Baptist and all them cats, they knew the human being was born already whacked out. The Buddha, in Buddhism, they call it dukkha. You were born into suffering, meaning you were born into the mental confusion of your mind. And because you were born into the mental confusion of your mind, right, whether it be Buddhist or Christian, it doesn't matter. If you're atheist, it doesn't matter. Because you're born into that confusion, you are basically, the byproduct of confusion is to make mistakes. It just is. Now, when you start to attach to a particular spiritual practice, a particular spiritual group, and they're starting to lay down the law, right? And you have this trust and this faith and the belief, whatever it might be to you guys, in the God of your understanding. Now, not only are you responsible to have forgiveness given back and forth amongst the world of men and women, and self-forgiveness back and forth to you, but now you got to deal with the superpower that's looking down basically in a psychological field of judgment, right? Of judgment. And they even talk about Judgment Day, the final day. And then you'll be deciding if you're going up or down or heaven or hell or whatever the case might be. And I have met many, many people that they crap in their pants over this. They literally do, pardon the language. But they're nervous wrecks over displeasing this God of their understanding. And they stand in front of a statue or they stand in front of the cross and their knees shake. And they wind up doing penance all the time, and they're constantly doing the rosary. And there's nothing wrong with that in the sense of the beautiful faith and the tradition and the holiness to it and the spiritual light and all of it. It's beautiful. It's actually beautiful. If you enjoy it, it's beautiful. And Buddhism has the same thing with the malas and the sutras and their pujas and their prayers. A lot of religious people have it. It's beautiful. But they also include in this process of great love and great beauty this other dark side. So much so, back in the 14th century, as you guys know, I'm sure the Dark Ages, people were being tortured and burned at the stake for just the smallest mistake. If you petted a rabbit in the woods and somebody saw it, they say she's a witch. And the next thing you know, they're pulling out your fingernails and they're burning you on a pile of wood to punish you because you need to have this done for God to forgive you. And that's how imposing that can be. Because no matter how much the human being says yes or no, I forgive you, it is limited, right? It's a human thing. You can talk, you can see them, you can push them away, they can come at you, you can write, you can do all of these things back and forth. But when you're dealing with the unseen, when you're dealing with what has been taught to you, when you're dealing with what has been basically preached into you, that can make you very, 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 very nervous and very uncomfortable. And as long as you're a good boy or a good girl, you kind of get through the day hoping that when you keep everything in check, that when your body physically ends, that you'll be able to go to, quote, a good place or be reunited with your family. And if you don't act like a good person and you do bad things and you do cause harm and cause trouble and all of that, then you're not going to be with them and you're going to go to the other place, which they call hell. Right? This place of darkness, right? So that's a big motivation for people to kind of stay on path, is it not? When someone's got your head into that. And yet, the Christ figure says himself, judge ye not. He's saying, don't you judge, don't you judge, don't you judge. Because he knew that judgment was born out of the ego. And depending upon your ego, you separate from the divinity of your soul. And in doing so, when there is judgment, there is persecution, there is prosecution, there is separation, the higher from the lower, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And as a result, the radiant beauty of the God of our understanding explodes. And it is replaced by something that we just pray to ask a favor. It is something that we ask to forgive. Please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me. You keep repeating that enough times, right? You repeat that enough times, you're really going to believe it, and you're really going to bite. And that, I want to say this to you properly. The people that suggest that they understand the will of the beloved, no one knows God's will. There is a very famous quote that comes out of the Japanese culture. It says, to understand the will of God would be like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. Don't even bother. The universe understands, and I want to mix these words, the universe, the beloved, God, whatever, because I don't want to get caught in this religious thing here with you guys. Whatever that interpretation is to you, right? Understand it is your mind and what has been taught to your mind that sets this up. Do you think the ducks and the squirrels and the birds and the cats and the dogs and the fish and the whales worry about that for one split second? Just by living as natural creatures, they are completely at peace. That is what you were born to experience. Not the fear and the worry and the anxiety and the trepidation of being guilt-ridden, fearful, anxious, worry all the time, being judged by outsiders. A clique of women reject the other woman because she doesn't have the right new dress. Guys push the other guy away because he doesn't have the best golf clubs or some other nonsense, right? I have more money than you, and if you have more money than me, and you have a better car than me, and I park on the other end of the parking lot, and you pull up front with your shiny new car. And as a form of judgment, I am better than you, I have earned more than you, I have made more than you, my life is better than yours, my kids have all gone to be doctors, your kid's just a custodian, you drive around in an old Volkswagen, I have a Mercedes. It's madness. And I can, I almost have to laugh. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's insanity. But quite honestly, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, that's how I thought. I aspired to be like that, right? I did. Nothing wrong with having nice things. There's nothing wrong with acquiring things in this lifetime. But when it modifies your personality, when it makes you feel better than other people, when you look down your nose at other people, now it's become a great darkness within you, right? It becomes a great darkness. The reason why you were born was to experience this peace and the union with this wonderful place we call Earth. That is why it was referred to as heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is still here. It is absolutely right in front of you right now. Look, just move your fingers. The miracle of moving your hands. Blink your eyes. The fact that you can hear me, that you can sit, that you can get out of your chair. It's a miracle. And as you know, there are many people that can't do that. They can't. Right? And we take it for granted. Right? We take it for granted. So when we're talking about forgiveness, forgiveness cannot be offered partially. You can't forgive 70%. It's like saying to my wife, I only love you 60%. Well, where the hell's the other 40%? For me, it's 100%. For my children, it's 100%. That's it. That's it. And for myself, it's 100%. It took me a long time. It did. A long time to really fall back in love with myself. Not in the sense of kiss, 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 kiss. Just the sense that I love myself in the fact that I understand that I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I am learning from these mistakes, and to the best of my ability, I try to move on and not do harm to others, and especially to myself. Right? And by offering compassion, by offering forgiveness, by stretching out my hand, by saying we're in this together, magic happens. And it's the same with you guys, right? So if you've done something to hurt somebody, right? You know what? Before I share that, I want to share this old story with you. Some of you may have heard of it. It was called the story of the prodigal son. It comes up. This story comes up in many cultures, by the way, but I'll give it to you in the fast version. This guy's got 2 sons. The man's a wealthy guy. He gives both his sons their inheritances. One son stays, and he works with his father and saves his money, and he does all the right things. The other guy, he goes out, he's gambling, he's doing whatever the hell drugs he's taking. He's got all kinds of women running around. And after a year or 2, he blows through his whole inheritance. He comes back and he says, Dad, I blew it. I made a big mistake. Please forgive me. I really, really did some bad stuff. And the father says to his son, come inside. He tells the house servants, give him fresh clothes, put a ring on his hand, wash his hair in oil, welcome my son back. He is more revered than the son who didn't wander away. He didn't. Because the son that didn't wander away, his level of consciousness was already there. He had already evolved, and his dad knew it, and his dad knew that he wasn't going to be jealous, none of that. He just knew that this young man, one son, was already evolved. He also understood the other son had to fall many times to come to that place where he could see it. And when he came home, his father forgave him completely. And the family reunited, and they celebrated with a big feast that his son found the path to peace finally after all of the struggling. And he was not going to find any fulfillment in the world of things. He saw that the pure light, the true peace in this lifetime is found inside. The acceptance of each moment as it arises with all its beauty, right? And that's a great story there. There's one other fast story I'll share with you also. It's a very similar in theme. There's a landlord who's got a client, and the client says, I'm really tight on my rent. The landlord says, okay, I'll let you go for a couple of months. I see you're working hard. Pay me when you can. That guy who the landlord says, take a break, goes home, and someone owes him money. And he beats that guy up. And he beats this guy up. He says, you owe me money. He beats the heck out of this guy. The landlord finds out the guy he gave a break to and forgave did not offer forgiveness to the other. And he sent this guy to prison, where they got a hold of him and did bad things. Follow me? So it's one thing to be forgiven, but it's another thing to offer forgiveness. And please, as we start to wind this down, please don't confuse forgetting and forgiveness. If you have been harmed by somebody, if you have been harmed by a person, a family, a group of people, a community of people, whatever it might be, and you really have felt that harm, you can say, okay, I do not forget what has happened. I am not going to re-expose myself to those dangers, right? I understand that they come from a different level of awareness than I do. I am not superior to them or better than them, but I can just know that I am not in that same flow. And therefore, they are forgiven because I'm not flowing like them. They're good like that, I'm good like this. And you let it be. But there are people that, as you guys know, can't do that. They have to harbor rage. They have to harbor anger. They have to seek retribution. They've got to talk about it all the time, and they never shut up with it, and it becomes perpetuating. And you know why? Because your ego loves it. Your ego loves to have an opponent, make no mistake about it. If you had no one to fight with, no one to argue with, I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 people I know would be miserable. They've got to complain about the supermarket person. They've got to complain about the gas station attendant. They've got to complain about the cat next door. You got to find something, right? Most people are like that. You got to find something to bitch about. You got to find something to complain about because it makes you feel whole. Have you not seen it? And because of that, you don't have any forgiveness, quote unquote, unless you handpick who you want to forgive. That is not forgiveness. That is not forgiveness, right? Forgive them. They know not what they do. They. Right? So as we evolve on this journey together, I just want to ask you, please, When you stand in front of the glass, come to understand how to forgive yourself. When you work with others and they work with you, be more patient and tolerant. Understand the gift of forgiveness. It'll set you free. You'll breathe easier. If your spouse has done something or if you've done something, talk it out. Forgive each other. You can't undo it. Move forward with new knowledge. And finally, depending upon your relationship with all that is, there's a great gift of grace and peace connected to this. Punishment and judgment have no place in the movement of grace. Have none. Okay? I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's always been an honor and a pleasure to work here tonight with you guys. I just want to make you aware of something. We actually put a little piece on my Facebook page about it. On Valentine's Day, February 14th, we've had a lot of requests for this, so you may want to give it a thought. We have our Circle of Spirits in my office, which we're bringing right here to the privacy of the Zoom readings, and I will work with you guys. It's only 6 people. It could be a family of 6. It could be a couple, just 2 and 2 and 2. It could be 6 different individuals. It doesn't matter. If you'd like to join me and be my Valentine on Valentine's Day night, we are getting together from 7 to 9 p.m. on Valentine's Day night for only 6 people. Please go to my website. If you'd like to be a part of that great experience, please just hit it, and it'll take you right to the login page, and all the information will be there. I wish you peace and a good night. Namaste. Thank you.